So this is a before and an after. So I've not done anything with the exposed metal, and what I think I'll do is sand that down and then coat it with something. This was soaked, but I think this is aluminum, so I'll probably just buff this out a little bit, make it look a little nicer. But the spacers came out really nice as compared to what's in there now. The hardware, wasn't so happy with these, so I'll probably sandblast that and then buff them. But this nice little piece I buffed with a little 4/0 steel wool and then blued it because it looked like that. So the new version looks a lot better, and it's soaking in oil after the bluing so that it doesn't rust right away. And we'll see how that turns out. But that came out nice. This was grody. Spider webs, no big deal, but just dirty. Not in bad condition. Just dirty. Dirty and not abused. I'll say the table was not abused, just used. All the pieces are there, and starting to put everything back together because the final clean will be the super rusty cast iron table. We'll call this before and after. So this will be the before wing in terms of rust and condition. Bolts, spacers. The back sides look about the same. I mean, I didn't really do anything in here. This one looks like more overspray from the coating. And then my version of fixed or cleaned up. How's that? Bolts, nuts and bolts, spacers cleaned, no rust. So the rust is gone, but obviously the pitting, the remnants of the pitting. So this was soaked in evapo-rust, then it was steel wool, cleaned with steel wool, and then it was blued, and then obviously oiled. And I'll flip it over here in a second for the top side view. And the top view. So you've seen this top before. That needs to be cleaned. And again, when you see how grody and rusty and yucky things are, and this will be the not highly polished. I decided to go with a satin finish, so I did the evapo-rust and then steel wool on this because this will get usage, so a high polish didn't make sense. And I found the nut that was the locking nut that was floating around there, so I put that back in. But that is that. So now it's time for this one. I thought this came out exceptionally well, the miter. So if you remember what this looked like, it was not quite as nice as this. So this was soaked in evapo-rust for about 12 hours, then steel wool, and then blued and oiled and set for about 24 hours in the oil. And then all the screws redone, bolts refinished. This was bead blasted so that the inside is satin and the outside has a polish, kind of like the little higher polish there, kind of like the steel wool. This was polished, and then obviously the washer in there. So This is a piece that I was talking about previously in terms of why I decided to blue it, because that is visible, and I think I'll put a little more oil in there so that it doesn't rust, and then points to 0, and then it's got a 45 indentation on each side, so you know you're on 45 or 0. So this came out, I would say, exceptionally well. And then this was obviously cleaned, but that just feels like glass. So that will look good. So here's what the motor came out. I did pick up a new V-belt because the one that was there is cracked and looks like it's on its way out. Seen better days. So new belt, we'll give that a try. But this was cleaned, and you'd have to go back and look at the original, but all the bolts, everything de-rusted, blasted, oiled, cleaned, polished. There's no this 27-pound motor, there's no more sawdust up in here, but it looks good. It came out exceptionally. It's just an HMF heavy motor. I think this motor alone weighs more than my current table saw, so I'm looking forward to putting that back together, powering it up, and seeing if it still works. So I wanted to show something that I got a kick out of that maybe you won't give a hoot nanny about. But as I took this wing apart and cleaned off the aluminum, as well as redid the I don't even know what this bracket's called, but the metal bracket, the track, let's call it the track. And I took a different approach with this one. Instead of soaking it, and I think I actually like this a little bit better maybe, I bead blasted it, and then to get the rust out, it was also quicker. Bead blasted, and then did the 4/0 steel wool. So what was cool, and why I'm making this video, is because when I pulled these apart the other day, these pieces of paper were folded up on top of each other, so they were maybe the equivalent of 1 inch long. So that was one piece. This was 2, 3, and 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 8 little pieces of paper were tucked in here. And you could tell that it kind of looked like, you know, maybe when they were doing this, they had the instructions, they just put it on and then tore the instructions off. But regardless, I found it interesting because this is from 1973, so this is, 49 years old. And when you look at where these came from, I jumped on the net and I found the original, or at least a copy of the original document, and it is actually the installation instructions for the wings, the table extension assembly, catalog number 9-29925, catalog number 9-29925. So I thought that was kind of cool to pull an old piece of history up. And then this particular piece was from page 2, and it talks about readjust the fence as follows, readjust as follows, fence adjustment. So to me, that's just a novelty, that the cool factor that makes a I don't know if I'd call this a restoration project, a cleaning project and a learning project with all this old stuff. It just adds a little bit of provenance to the history of the component. So time to clean this, put it back together, and then work on the main table. All right, my intent was never to take this saw apart, or this 80-poundish. It's so heavy I'm not even gonna lift it. But once I started taking little pieces off and cleaning and doing things, one thing led to another, buying new belt, buying some pieces, and discovering that everything on this original 1973 saw is here, including the, what's this little thing called? Cute little name to make sure the saw blade, or to align with the saw blade. But I was just about down to this being the last component, and as the saw was still fully, or at least the tabletop portion of it, the case and the actual pulley with the saw mechanism was still intact, I decided that the best way to do this was to remove it. So after a lot of maneuvering, flipping, bolt removals, it is now ready to work on in isolation. So again, didn't intend for this project to even happen. All I was looking for was a replacement saw to cut straight lines, and now I'm in deeper than I thought I was going to be. So more to come. Nice and quiet on a chilly weekend morning. So the cabinet got its wipe down since I've taken it apart completely. And again, for 49 years old, it's in great condition. Minor issues. I always notice this nut, which is not the original, sticking right out here. I don't know if you can see it right there. It just, there's an affinity for that nut to go there because of the wiring. And it's a good thing I took it apart, because that was the ground, and the ground, that nut had come loose. So that was going to be a shocking surprise at some point. But all clean and ready to move on to the next thing. Today is table day. So I tried a couple of different rust dissolvers, which adequate, and I watched a gazillion videos on what people do, and some people sandpaper, some people do a form of scouring pad. So I'm going to try with a moderate stripping pad from 3M. Let some automation do the work with a palm sander. And I've seen a lot of consensus on WD-40, which has worked well for me so far. So that is going to be the approach for the next period of time. Back later. I get a good angle, because that was literally 2 minutes worth of work with no pressure, no whatever, and I thought I would share the wipe. Wow. All right, I would say for 2 minutes worth of work, that looks pretty darn good. So hopefully we won't get all this stuff on the camera, and we'll do one live. how long I spent on the first one. Let's see what we've got here. Looking pretty good. Better than here. Alright. Wow, that's messy. Messy, messy, messy. More to come later. Alright, so in general I'm happy with the progress, but I did have to resort to sandpaper, and unfortunately someone in the last 50 years, you can see these are really deep, and I don't know if those are factory or if some goober just decided to take, you know, 10 grit to a, looks like a rotary, an old rotary sander, a disc sander from years ago, because these are huge circles and they're deep too. So I'm the fact that this is so scoured, I'm going to step my sanding down to a lower grade to try and lift some of that and sacrifice a little bit of the table, but you know, it is what it is. More to come. Working in reverse today. We started with the lightest approach, the scouring pad, or the least abrasive or intrusive, the scouring pad, and that got the rust off but left a lot. And then busted down to sandpaper starting at 220, 180, 160, 120, then down to 60, and still uncovering just you can see the shit ton of whoever did this years before, whomever, just a brutal attack with some tool. So now I feel okay trying this. This is a 60 grit coarse wheel for my grinder, and I will try and be as even as possible and then work my way back up from this to sandpaper to scour, and we'll see how that works. Okay, this is about as good as it gets with my limited metalworking skills, and you can see that there's some really deep, I don't know if these are factory back in the 70s or what, but they seem to be consistent all over the place. Whoever did whatever did a good job, but it's better than what it was. So on to the next step of cleaning and or assembly. Alright, I'm wondering how this video came out, because when I turned my camera on, it had me reset everything, so I'm not sure what happened there. So maybe we'll have video. Alright, so tonight was motor install, motor and new belt, same 2 1/8 inches, or rather 2 1/16 inches, almost a 16th, closer to 32nd I think. Motor's been rewired and attached in that plate, and I've run my wires inside, so I am ready to turn this on. I will turn it around, put the tripod up, and then we're going to turn it on and see if it works. Back in a few.